All right, final video on these 302. Well, these aren't 302s; these are 714s. I will just dive right in here. What I ended up with was, well, I started at, these are my start numbers. Essentially 185 at 5/10 and it maxed out. I got that up to 217 at 5/10, but it actually kept climbing. The port didn't stall anymore, which I felt was good. This was a left-hand port. They ultimately peaked at, well, actually, they may not have peaked. I was putting the retainer against the guide, but I don't know who's going to put a 800 lift cam in a 318, so it's kind of irrelevant at that point. Really, the 5/10 numbers, I think, is where you're going to see that it's more applicable for your type of usage. I did check a right-hand port, and they were very similar numbers, just within a CFM or two about everywhere. So there wasn't much variance there. And again, this was with a standard 178 valve. I think there's definitely some more to be had, probably right in through here at least, if a guy went to a bigger valve. The problem with that is, from the math I've done, measuring cross section, it has a tiny little cross section. This is my numbers before I took out the corners, and they were bad enough, and then I took out for the corners and they got even worse. So that's the ported. This average is 1.5 inches of area through the port. So, and then unported is even worse. It's 1 inch and 3/10. I sized the throat to 88%, and unfortunately your throat's supposed to be the smallest part of the port, but it's not, because the average cross section was only 62%. And I did some loose numbers, and this is based on max effort stuff, but that will let a 318, that cross section will let a 318 turn 6,000 halfway respectably. It's theoretically out of air at 4,500 on a 360. That doesn't mean it's going to completely lay over. It's just based on your ideal, like, max effort minimum cross section calculations. And I think I based that on that was an average cross section that I got those numbers from, which is I believe bore times stroke times RPM you desire to turn, and then you just divide that by 190,000, and that gives you the minimum cross section area for that RPM. But it doesn't mean the engine won't turn that RPM. It just is not ideal. So that just gives you a ballpark of what cubic inches does to the amount of airflow needed. And really, this port is just struggling with runner volume. So with that being said, places that I do feel like improvements could still be made. See if my light's on here. Yeah. This is my second head. I'm not near done yet, but basically just make the thing bigger. You can't go much left to right because your pinch is right there. You can narrow up your divider. You can raise the roof some. It's not real thick right there, so you're not going to get a ton. You can get a little bit right there where that rocker boss is at. I don't know whether lowering the floor would gain you anything. I guess it might, because cross section is cross section, but I tend to try to stay away from lowering the floor any, because my understanding is there isn't much activity down there anyways. So that's kind of where I'm at on them. I poured a port mold of this through the process, and I made a video about pouring these if you're interested in that. But this was how it started out, and it really lets you see a visual of the port, and anywhere there's a void, how, look, I mean, I can put my thumb in where that guide boss was. That's how much volume is being taken up, and you got a port that's already too small. So that was as cast. You can see the short side, which isn't bad actually, and then from the top it really nicks down at the pinch. And this was at like 80%. I was basically done, and I did a little bit more work, mostly over here on this purple one coming up next. But you can see the pinch isn't quite as bad. The roof's rounded. Short side I didn't change much. I was happy with the short side on these, but I got all that where my thumb doesn't sit down in there anymore. Most of the guide's gone. And then the purple one, I actually have enough port bias that it actually is flowing off the common wall, pointed towards the center of the cylinder, which is good. And this is opened up more right here. One thing I would do is, if you're wanting to go for more, which this is when it starts to get really time consuming, is trying to take copious amounts of metal out of cast iron heads. But right in through here, I would probably kind of follow that bowl up and try to straighten that out right there. I don't know how much more you can go. And just like if you go to a 188 valve, or some guys are putting 202s in them, which I would never do because it's pointless. But I don't know that you can ever get your bowl back out, get your bowl percentages. This is 100%. The bowl area, or the bowl area is 100% of the valve diameter. And then next down to 88 for the throat, and then back out to the valve. So if you take this on out to a bigger valve, I don't know if you can get your percentages back, but you know what, the gain may still be there, I don't know. But just in comparison, this is an aluminum Renegade head for a small block Mopar. And that's as cast. And gives you an idea how much more just volume is in that. I don't know what these are. They're probably 175s, 180s, something like this. And I think this is from what I can tell by how much it took to pour the mold, I think it's about 140 cc's. So that gives you an idea of just the massive change. And I mean, there's definitely gain to going aftermarket heads. I just like playing with junk and seeing what I can get out of them. And this gives you even more of a idea of the tiny little stock one. So I think that was the bulk of it. I think there would be flow to be had if you wanted to put a Chevy valve in it, neck down to a 5/16. There's something there for sure, because again, your area is the problem, so any area you can get out of there is going to help. And like I said in my other videos, the most important thing on these is, or one of the most important, is your valve shrouding, getting that opened up, and same on the exhaust. And this, I was just blending, there's a ledge there, I just wanted to blend that ledge out. I'm not a fan of polishing chambers. It's really time consuming, and I don't really feel that there's much there, so I just didn't want that step that was there creating turbulence as the air comes in and hits. There was a ledge right here. I wanted it to be able to just kind of flow on in there. But yeah, like I say, get your throat size, combustion chambers open up. I did not CC my chambers. I'm curious how much I lost, but I can tell I did get my 302 heads on my 360 finally. I did a couple years ago, and there was a noticeable change there. They run pretty damn good for what the motor is, and I can tell on my hot restarts that it's got more cranking compression because it's starting hard now, and it has never done that with I had open chamber, I think 596 smog heads on it before, and it never ever cranked hard. And I mean, the first time I cranked it with them smaller heads, it cranked hard, and like I said, they run good. So I'm pretty happy with them for the money. I mean, I paid $50 for the 302 heads. I got these I bought an engine and 2 transmissions for $200. So I have no money in them. I can do my own valve jobs. I do my own porting. So it's good to throw on some old junk just to make it run good. And like I said, they seem like they're going to work. But I just wanted to pass on some nitty gritty stuff here, because nobody seems to care about these little old heads anymore. I was trying to think if there's anything else I want to pass on. I did flow those 596s, which I may do a video about them one of these days. Figure out what I did with them. I think these are... No, that ain't them. Actually, yeah, that is. These were with a bowl blend and a gasket match. That was it. Back cut valves. No, actually, no back cut. I made a note there. They maxed out at 221 at 450, but went turbulent, so you actually start going backwards at anything over 450. But this is interesting to see. These gain this basically strictly through runner volume. The numbers down low are eerily similar, but here you go to a bigger valve and you pick up in the mid, and then they're coming on good, and then they shit out. So I may play with those a little bit. I think those potentially probably have 240 in them. with not a whole lot of work. So I may cut on one and see what I can do. I don't really see a difference between these heads and the J heads and the X heads and all that. They're all garbage in my opinion, but I think they could be made decent. I don't like the open chamber heads. I like closed chamber heads, so that's why I've shied away from them, but I may try to mess with one. But like I said, one of these days I may do a little video on the 596s. But and if you had a question about this is a Ford head that I'm getting ready to do for my race car, pouring a port mold. Again, if you want to see how to do that, I made a super quick nitty-gritty video about that too. So have a nice day. And I didn't even discuss the exhaust numbers. I figured out how to edit stuff, and so I hope I can attach this to the first video. Starting out, they're absolutely appalling. 121 at 4/10. They were maxed out. When I got done, they were up averaging around 70% everywhere of the intake, 75%, and flowed about 167. The 302 heads with the bigger 160, I think I went 160 on those. They were up in the 180s. So again, I would almost put an exhaust valve in it before I'd put an intake valve in it, but that's just me. But yeah, so they went, like I said, the 302s with the bigger valve went solidly up in the 180s, and they had better exhaust percentages too. But these are decent. That's respectable. I was taught anything over 60, but since then I've heard more like 70 to 80. You don't need over 80 at all. But this is where they're at. This was actually on another, I think that was on the other port. I didn't do very much work on the exhaust on these. I just kind of knocked down the big stuff and they kind of came around. They're horrible to begin with though. It's mostly in the throat. Get the throat opened up and the short side blended. And I don't see any point in hogging out the exits, making them all funky, because then it ends up like a bell mouth kind of thing going on. And I don't feel like that's good either. Because like if you take that all the way out there, it's just going to be a funnel. And I think you should control your area a little bit better than that. You know, open it up as much as you can on in there, but just kind of make the exit match the rest of the port instead of the port match the gasket, if that makes any sense. So, all right, I think that's everything.